pretty excited about today's topic. Are you?
I always enjoy a good discussion.
Well, it's always interesting for us to pick a topic and then see how it's affecting our, like, how we relate it to our everyday lives, like in real time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it drives many friends and family, I think, a little crazy. But we enjoy it.
Woo!
So
Yeah, okay. So thank you for those who are joining us. We appreciate your time. We know it's a crazy season. Everyone's busy and frantic, it seems, in some kind of ways. But we hope that you're able to take a little time to breathe and to just listen to what these crazies have to say. All right, so today on episode 5, we're going to be talking about nurturing the human spirit, which we could go real deep into, but we only have a little bit. And just in advance, we might break this up in 2 parts.
it's a lot.
Yeah, let's dive in then, Dad. So how about you kick us off and just tell us what nurturing your spirit, what does that mean to you?
The conscious journey that I started on was in 1977 when I was getting ready to get out of the military, and I had just depleted myself mentally, physically, and spiritually. I had something to prove, and I proved it. And at the end of that, it wasn't what I thought it would be. I was very exhausted.
Well, how did you, what are some specifics? You don't have to tell us all your dirty secrets, but what, when you say rebellion, what do you mean? Because everyone rebels differently.
Well, I grew up in a very, like I said, legalistic family, and if it was fun, you couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Pick something.
And didn't you feel like God hated you, or tolerate?
Well, I laugh about it now, and the whole thought in our mind was, God hates you and has a terrible plan for your life.
Yeah.
And it was a real perverted, distorted view of who God is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I went out to prove that I could do whatever I wanted to, regardless of what my dad, the church, and God said.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that. It was weird because I would be in those moments of just doing my own thing, and somehow God would show up
Mm-hmm.
in those situations, and I would just somehow know that God loved me. And it was very weird.
Do you have a specific example of how God showed up for you one time?
Not specifically, but after I got out of the Navy and I'd been out, I think I was married. My dad lived in Oklahoma City, and he got a phone call from the airport. Somebody called him from the airport, and they said, "Do you know Jay Powers?" And he said, "Yes, he's my son." And they went, "Well, I just want you to know that he saved my life." I don't know who that was to this day.
Wow.
But I remember being in a drunken stupor with friends and us talking about the deeper things of life, like God and spiritual stuff, and even in the middle of all of that, I would be able to express that God did love us, even though I had my own distorted sense of what that meant. Somehow I was able to share it with somebody else.
Oh, yeah. When I think about the times in my life when I was at my lowest, that's when I felt God the most. I feel like, I've always connected with the outdoors, and that's where I've always felt most free and at home with God. And so I have plenty of memories and stories of connecting with God in that kind of way. But when I think to, like, the deeper or the darker moments in my life, it's kind of crazy and wild to think how God showed up then. And And even just to be sitting here talking about this like we are right now, to casually be saying the word God. And, for me, it's been such a long journey. I rejected so much of religion and Christianity and God. I don't think I ever stopped believing. Like, I think I always knew God or something bigger existed, but I had so much trauma around the word God and Jesus. I had to unpack a lot of my stuff to be able to get to the place that we're even sitting here right now talking about it. Because if you would have told me a year ago that I'd be sitting here having a conversation with my dad on a podcast that we started and we're talking about God, I would have probably just, laughed in your face.
Well, I think that's what's going on in the world. We're not the only one. There are people that you mentioned, like Kat, what's her name? Kat.
Oh, Kat Von D. Yeah.
Kat Von D and some other personalities that people know are starting to go, there's got to be something more. I can't do it on my own. I've tried. I'm even a celebrity. I've got fame. I've got money. I've got all the stuff, and it's still a hole there. And you can't find it. And it moves from, the whole thought moves from something to someone.
Yeah. Yeah. God isn't just an idea, or this made up figure.
Some skeptics would call it some sort of fairy tale to comfort you in the times of need.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like, I used to believe that it was, religion and specifically Christianity was an escape. It was, we're all, one day, it was all focused on the afterlife. One day when you go to heaven or hell, it wasn't focused on the nitty gritty right now. And since then, I've grown and I've dissected a lot of what I used to believe and no longer do believe that.
Well, and the truth is, it is an escape. It's the greatest escape you'll ever know of.
Yeah, but it also, like, it doesn't pull you out of this world. It makes...
Not at all.
It makes you more... I feel like for me, it made me more human and things more realer than real.
It pulls you out of the pit of despair.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so nurturing the human spirit. When you think of that, Dad, like, how does your spirit get nurtured?
Think of the high desert in New Mexico, or maybe on your way, if you're out in the Great Plains and you get up into the high desert around 4,000 or 5,000 feet, and it's been months since it rained. That's what it's like. But eventually it starts soaking in.
Yeah.
If you've ever gotten dehydrated and you understand what being thirsty is like, then you kind of get a little bit of it. Yeah. We just feed ourselves, our bodies and our souls and our minds, and we have so much knowledge, and yet our spirits get basically nothing. We fill up on entertainment and food and drug, sex, and rock and roll, and our spirits are dying.
Yeah. Someone once said that the most endangered species on the planet is the human spirit.
Yeah, I personally believe that.
And
yet, at the same time, because we've gotten to this place of emaciation, people are starting to go, there's got to be something else, and there's this, you can sense this shift maybe in the cosmos and in the culture where people are going, what is that? What am I missing here?
Yeah. Or like, I mean, I think about that, my own journey of when I have this, when I get married to this person, I used to think that, like, with my, one of my last relationships, once we get married, then I'll find peace. Or I've peaked several times, and I'm sure I'll peak some more in my physical strength and my athleticism. And I've gotten to those places where I've met goals and hit those markers with, like, I'm proud of this and this, what an achievement. I've climbed this mountain. I've, I now can lead climb or whatever it is. And you get there and you hit it, and then it's like, okay, why do I still feel the way I do in terms of whether it's lack of meaning or lack of purpose or direction. And I feel like when we're talking about nurturing the human spirit, for me, that means finding purpose and meaning in this big old beautiful messy life,
Yeah, I agree with you. There's this, and those things aren't bad, having goals in life. And
no,
fact,
not
that's
at all.
part of living.
Yeah.
And, ancient scriptures talk about the vanity of just seeking your own desire and just filling yourself up with stuff that's empty, vain things that don't really matter.
Yeah. Well, I like the progression where, it goes from me, and I, to then it goes to us and to we, and then it goes to God and to all, and it shifts for me, a big perspective shift was I used to think, well, I was at the center and God was up here. He was far away. He was distant. He, didn't seem that interested. Mm-hmm. And when I really dove into my spirituality, I started to see a shift where I was no longer at the center, but God was at the center.
Yeah,
and that changed everything for me.
Yeah,
it should, right? Like, I think that any spiritual practice any of us take on, for me, we've talked about this before, like, don't tell me your faith, show me your faith. And I think there's a time and place for that. I don't think we keep our mouth shut at all times.
Relate that to how that nurtures the spirit.
Is it helping me to be more loving and more kind and more patient? And if it's not, then what's the point? Like, if it's not transforming my heart, if it's not getting to the core of my stuff, then what is it? Like, I've gone down a lot of different spiritual practices and paths, and got really caught up, I feel like, in the spiritual materialistic world, where it's all like you're doing, you have your 10 different spiritual exercises you're doing every day, and yet I still it wasn't satiating my spirit. So those tools can be really good for us, but how, again, do we get to the place where it's actually feeding our spirit?
Usually happens right after what I like to call a rude awakening.
Yeah.
And I like
Definitely.
the picture that brings up. It's like a cold bucket of water in the face, or a slap in the face, and your life's falling apart, and then all of a sudden you go, oh, maybe I need to do something differently. Mm-hmm. You can go your whole life and never get here. Mm-hmm. Or when you have a rude awakening, you can go, what needs to be different?
Yeah. I think of that moment in Denver when I had that lightning strike at the bar, when I was, it was like a slap of sobriety in my face. It didn't stop me right then and there. I had a moment of clarity, but then it's like, it's not this overnight thing where you wake up, even when you have the awareness, to then, those changes take time. I mean, It's a lot of unpacking. We've talked about this. It's a lot of unlearning. Mm-hmm. And, we also talk a lot about how it starts out as this disorientation. Mm-hmm. And then there's a lot of time of having to grow and reorient, and let go and grow in a lot of ways. So.
Yeah, I think AA calls that hitting your rock bottom. People coming to some sort of belief system comes from crisis.
Yeah. Well, I read this article in Psychology Today. It says, while fewer Americans believe in God, and millennials are the least religious generation in the last few decades, 9 out of 10 Americans have relied on prayer in times of duress. It's like the ego just will not go out without putting up a fight, and it's like, I wrestled so hard, so hard, and I feel like there's that moment, if you've ever done like timed yourself on a bar, like hanging.
Pull-ups or whatever.
Yeah, but if you're just hanging there and the moment before you're about to let go, you tighten the hardest ever, and it's like that grip is just so tight, and that's the ego. I feel like that just fights it and fights it.
Good picture.
And then you eventually let go.
Well, what letting go is to me that's humility.
Yeah, and surrender, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Surrender. Yeah. Which so when when we're talking about nurturing the spirit, I feel like in order for us to even get to that place of feeding it and tending to it, we have to first be humbled, right? We have to surrender to...
Be humbled or humble yourself. A smart person will humble themselves and not have to get put through the grinder to do it. But honestly, most of us have to go through that meat grinder to realize that we even need help.
Yeah, I look back on my 20s, and I definitely... There were some things I took to heart, advice and wisdom from older people, or seeing, some of my older friends go through stuff and be like, okay, I don't think I need to do that. I don't need to try that. But there was a lot of things I actually had to learn the hard way, unfortunately.
Well, that's the way. I guess one of the best teachers is experience.
How is that as a parent watching your kid go through the stuff that you're like, what are you?
It's hard because you and I went through that too. The only difference between you and me is I'm just twice as old. And you haven't been 68, but I've been 37.
I'm not 37, but
whatever, 36. How easily we forget.
When's my birthday?
You're in your 30s, July 2nd.
Oh, nice! Wow.
But it's like I have made more mistakes than you. I've been through some stuff that you haven't been through just by experience. Doesn't mean you're not smart.
Yeah.
That you don't know what you're doing. It's just that's the whole dynamic too of relationships.
Well, and I think we're kind of dealing with that with, my niece and nephew who are 19 and 16 now, and seeing some of the ways that they make sense of the world. It's hard for me to not want to interject and be like, are you freaking kidding me? It's one of those things that definitely is humbling for me, because I'm like, man, I said the same things, and I thought I was so different and unique.
Well, the 16-year-old in our family is the smartest one that's ever been born, and we're all stupid.
Yeah.
And they know everything, and we know nothing.
Yeah.
And we're going, rude awakening on its way to happening.
Yeah. Oof.
And it's hard to keep, answer your question, when you see that, when you see your child careening off into oblivion, it's really hard to not say something. And the discernment is, when do you say something and when do you not say something and let the person crash and burn? In our culture, we try to protect our children from going through anything. And sometimes you just have to go through it.
Yeah.
We don't, we will protect our children to a fault and actually hurt them by not letting them experiencing life's trouble and life's pain sometimes.
I actually heard this guy said, we often prepare the road for our youth versus preparing our youth for the road. We cater and try to, kind of, manipulate and set up all these like little safety zones or whatever, when, really, what if we taught our kids, skills that would teach them when they're out there on their own, There are a lot of different themes when we're talking about nurturing our spirit, right? We talked about surrender and what that means to get to this place of acknowledging that we don't know everything. What's another theme for you, Dad? And when you think of nurturing your spirit,
you have to have awareness that you need to change before you can change. But then it's adopting and adapting to a posture of gratitude. And it's not based on an emotion. Emotion can come out of it and be part of it, but it's really deciding to be grateful. waking up in the morning doing like the Jewish people do that are devout Jews. They do the prayer before they even get out of bed
Yeah,
as they're waking up. What is that called?
It's called the Moda'ani. It's something I do every morning before I even open my eyes. It's a prayer that basically is giving thanks for waking up and having another opportunity. There are a lot of people who don't wake up the next day.
Yeah. So it's a frame of mind.
Yeah.
And I don't do that, but it's as I'm practicing this and learning it is waking up and being grateful, waking up and being thankful that I live where I live, and that I've got opportunity that a lot of people don't have. I mean, we really do have privilege. To sum that up is being grateful for what you have, choosing it, recognize it, even saying it, not only to yourself, but to other people.
I talk to myself out loud all the time, and I'm sure it drives you all crazy and other roommates in the past crazy. But I say that kind of stuff out loud. I think that it's so important to verbalize and declare some of these things, whether,
Some people would call those affirmations.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, Keiki and I we practice saying a lot of affirmations. I mean, and that's as basic as looking at myself in the mirror and saying I love you. I do that. I try to do that every day, and not just think it, but say it, speak it out loud. And
go ahead.
I think there's weight and power in vibration and in our voices and in sound and
it's not just saying words. What is the spirit behind those affirmations? Who does God say we are?
Yeah.
We can say we're this and that and the other. I'm great, I'm good, I'm smart, and it may be true, but so what?
Yeah.
You're just telling yourself that is good, but who does God say you are? Yeah. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. Before you were in your mother's womb, I knew you. That doesn't even make any sense, but when you start thinking about it.
Thank you so much for joining us on episode 5 of the PowersShift podcast. Today's discussion on nurturing the human spirit has opened up so many avenues of thought and reflection. There's so much depth to this topic that we've decided to continue our exploration in a part 2. Join us next week for episode 6, where we'll dive even deeper into the nuances of spiritual growth. Until then, keep reflecting, keep connecting, and stay inspired.